Okay, let's unpack this. We have a serious problem when we talk about high strangeness. It's a credibility problem, right?
It absolutely is.
I mean, usually when we look at these accounts of contact, whether it's, angels, aliens, interdimensional beings, we're asked to rely on the testimony of people who, frankly, were already looking for something spiritual.
Or the event just happens in a complete vacuum. No witnesses, no physical traces, nothing. Just a story.
It's the locked room problem of ufology, isn't it?
Exactly. If an event happens in a void, it just stays in the void. It doesn't touch history. It doesn't leave a footprint in the mud. And that makes it very, very easy for skeptics to dismiss and, honestly, very hard for researchers to verify.
Exactly. But today we are breaking that rule. We are looking at a case that is so deeply embedded in the harsh physical reality of the 20th century that it forces us to rethink the boundaries of the phenomenon.
This is not a story about a mystic in a cave.
Not even close. We're talking about a man who stood right at the intersection of rigorous empirical science and, well, the wildest mysticism imaginable.
And a man whose life wasn't just touched by this phenomenon, but you could argue it was engineered by it.
We are diving into the enigma of Jacques Bordas Bley. Now, if you're a longtime reader of ufology, you might know him as Jacques Bordas, maybe Jacques Bley, if you've read Jacques Vallée's famous book, Messengers of Deception.
Right, or maybe you've seen the plagiarized versions floating around in Spanish ufology from the 60s and 70s.
But the sources we have today, and specifically we have to mention the 2024 historical correction by researcher Jordi Ardami, they paint a much more complex and, frankly, a much more believable picture.
Oh, Ardanoui is really the hero of this deep dive. I mean, he went back to the primary sources, the civil registries, military archives, medical records.
The actual paperwork?
The actual paperwork. He stripped away what we call mythological accretion to find the biological reality underneath. He moved us away from the legend of Jacques and back to the reality of Jean.
And that biological reality is where we have to start.
Yeah.
Because the central claim here is it's audacious. We're talking about a man who claimed to be adopted by non-human intelligence as a child, was promised a form of agelessness, and then he proceeded to live to be exactly, and I mean to the day and year 1 century old.
Born 1911, died 2011.
It's a statistical improbability that just anchors the entire story.
It does. But to understand why that end date is so shocking, we really have to look at the starting line. We need to go back to Barcelona in 1911.
So let's set the scene. Early 20th century Spain. Jaume Bordas Bley is born. What's the baseline here? Because in stories like this, the protagonist is usually, special from birth.
Right, they see things, they have psychic powers as a toddler or something like that.
Exactly.
But the sources actually emphasize the exact opposite. The baseline is a deficit. In the early 1920s, as a child, Jaime is described as highly fragile, chronically overweight, sickly, just constitutionally weak.
So he wasn't the chosen one because of his strength.
No, he was a candidate because of his weakness.
And we have to remember, being a sickly child in 1920s, Barcelona wasn't just a social inconvenience. That was a serious survival risk.
Oh, absolutely. We have to contextualize this. This is pre-antibiotic Europe. Penicillin isn't widely available yet. The sanitation infrastructure isn't what it is today. I mean, child mortality was high. Tuberculosis, respiratory infections, even a simple fever. These were killers.
So being fragile was essentially a life sentence of limitations.
If not an early grave, yes. Parents in that era didn't just worry about their sick kids. They prepared for the worst.
So this vulnerability is the key metric for the entire case. It's the problem that the phenomenon offered to solve.
Correct. It creates a need state, a void that needs filling.
Okay, so picture it. A 12-year-old boy, this is roughly 1923. He's aware of his own weakness. He feels it every time he tries to run, every time he gets winded climbing stairs. He steps out onto the terrace of his family's home in Barcelona. And this is where the narrative shifts from a sort of Dickensian story of a sick child to something out of a Spielberg movie.
It's a brazen daylight encounter. He describes observing multiple metallic triangular craft navigating the airspace over the city.
Navigating, that's a key word.
It's a very key word. These weren't just lights drifting in the wind or, swamp gas. They were under intelligent control, moving with purpose against the wind, executing maneuvers. And then 3 of them descend and land right near the terrace.
And this isn't a monster in the closet moment. An entity actually steps out. But the description, it's so unexpected for a child's imagination in 1923.
It really is.
If I'm a kid in the 20s, I'm probably imagining ghosts or maybe, I don't know, mechanical men. something from the pulps.
But it's very distinct. He describes a being wearing a white suit and a mantle. Bordas later described the vibe as projecting clinical or ceremonial authority.
Clinical or ceremonial?
Yeah. This wasn't a beast, it was an official. It was closer to a doctor making a house call than a monster trying to scare a child. The mantle suggests a hierarchy, a role, a purpose.
And the communication reflects that authority,
Oh,
right? It's not spoken.
Not spoken at all. It's telepathic or maybe even precognitive. The entity just bypasses the take me to your leader nonsense and goes straight to the boy's core trauma. It understands that Jaime hates being weak. It doesn't ask him. It knows him.
It validates his internal state.
Exactly. It looks at this broken biological machine and says, we can fix this. And then it makes the offer. The entity says, now that we have adopted you, we will never forsake you. In the future, we will come back to you again.
That language is so interesting. Adopted.
It's a contractual statement, isn't it? Adoption implies responsibility. It implies a change in parentage or at least guardianship. They are essentially saying, you belong to us now.
But they don't just offer words. They offer a physical object. And this is the moment of the Trojan feast. The entity hands him a small, dark, square object. It looks like a piece of candy or a lozenge. Jaime, being a kid, puts it in his mouth.
And immediately realizes it is not candy. He describes a harsh, tar-like taste.
That detail just sticks with me. Tar-like. If you were inventing a fantasy, wouldn't you say it tasted like honey or ambrosia or electric fizz?
Doesn't be magical, yeah.
Tar sounds industrial. It sounds medicinal. It sounds, well, unpleasant.
It lends significant credibility to the account, I think. It suggests a chemical or a biological compound rather than some magical treat. It anchors the experience in a very specific sensory reality.
And this concept of the Trojan feast is vital here, isn't it? In folklore, from the Celtic fairy traditions to the Greek underworld, eating the food of the others is the binding act.
It's the point of no return. You see it everywhere.
Like Persephone, eating the pomegranate seeds.
Precisely. In those myths, if you eat the food of the underworld or the food of the fae, you can never truly return to the mortal world. Your physiology changes. You become bound to their realm.
And in Jaime's case, the food wasn't magical fruit. It was a black, tar-like square.
But the function is the same. Once you consume their substance, you are metabolically linked to their world. You can never truly return to being a mundane human. Your system has been altered.
So he eats the space tar.
Right.
And the physiological reaction is immediate.
It knocks him out cold. He experiences profound drowsiness, falls unconscious, and then wakes up with missing time. His system essentially went into a reboot mode.
Like a computer installing a massive update.
Exactly. You have to shut down to let the changes take effect.
So the question is, did the reboot work? We have a sick, overweight kid who eats this space tar and passes out. What happens when he wakes up? Does he just have a bad taste in his mouth, or is he fundamentally different?
The biographical data is staggering here. And this is where Ardernoux's research into the records is so important. We can look at the period between age 12 and 16, the years immediately following the ingestion. And Jacques Bordas Bley undergoes a complete physiological metamorphosis.
He pulls a Captain America.
In a sense, yes. Without the chamber and the Vita rays, but with pretty much the same result. The sources say he shed the sickly disposition entirely. He transforms into a remarkably robust, highly fit, muscular young man. The fragility just evaporates.
The sickly child is dead.
Gone. The robust man is born.
And this isn't just cosmetic. This isn't just him hitting puberty and filling out. This new engine, this new body, drives him to change his entire environment. He leaves the city and heads for the Pyrenees.
He gravitates toward the environment that matches his new capacity. He becomes a mountaineer, a guide, a hotelier, a climber in terrain that requires extreme cardiovascular endurance.
He starts living a life that would have physically killed the boy he was just 4 years prior.
Absolutely. This is what I mean about grounding the story. If he had stayed in Barcelona and become a clerk or a tailor, the story's just a story. But he used the body. He tested the upgrade daily against the mountains.
It's as if the engine was running too hot for sedentary city life.
That's a great way to put it. He needed the altitude, the cold, the physical exertion to balance the equation.
But he didn't stop at physical endurance. And this brings us to the scientist aspect of his persona. Because usually when you hear contactee, you think of someone who drifts away from society, maybe becomes a bit of a hermit or a pure mystic.
But Jaime does the opposite. He doubles down on institutional science.
He integrates.
Completely. In the 1930s, the Spanish Civil War is looming. The Generalitat de Catalunya, the regional government, needs accurate weather data for the war effort. Understanding the weather is crucial for aviation, for artillery, for troop movements. They need a meteorologist.
And they don't just hand the job out.
Oh no, it's a competition. A rigorous academic gauntlet, a public examination. There were 15 qualified aspirants-educated men, university-trained, and Jacques Bordas Bley competes against them.
And the guy who ate the alien tar candy wins.
He crushes it. He secures the position. He becomes a tenant d'aviation, an aviation lieutenant, and is assigned to the Tour at a home, the observatory on the Mont Cenis Massif.
I want to just pause on the image of that. You have a man who knows, in his mind, that he was adopted by aliens. He has this profound mystical secret. But his day job is sitting on top of a mountain, operating sensitive meteorological equipment, reading barometers, checking wind speeds, and distinguishing between storm fronts and enemy bombers.
It provides him with an impenetrable shield of credibility. I mean, he was trained to observe the sky. He knew what atmospheric pressure did. He knew cloud formations. He knew aviation mechanics. He knew what a lenticular cloud looked like versus a solid object.
So, later in life, when he says, "I saw something anomalous," he isn't speaking as a layman who might mistake Venus for a UFO.
He's speaking as a professional observer of the atmosphere. He establishes the baseline reality better than anyone. He knows normal better than the skeptics do.
You can't tell a meteorologist, "Oh, that was just a cloud inversion."
Not if he's the guy who writes the manual on cloud inversions, no.
But the 1930s in Spain, that wasn't just about checking the barometer. The Civil War was a slaughterhouse. It was brutal. Brother against brother, and Jean gets caught right in the gears of it.
This is the crucible. This is the ultimate stress test for that gift he received. While running a hotel at Santa Fe del Mont Cenis, alongside his observatory duties, he was accused of harboring an anti-Republican refugee.
A false accusation, right?
Yes. Investigations later proved it was completely false. But in the paranoia of a civil war, due process is non-existent. Accusations are verdicts. He was kidnapped at gunpoint by a faction leader and 2 accomplices.
And they dragged him to a basement in Barcelona.
On Casteil de la Bonanova, yes.
The details here are horrific. We have to be clear about this. This wasn't a polite interrogation.
Not at all. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. The captors are drunk. They strip him naked. They slam him against the walls. They beat him. It was torture. Plain and simple. It was an attempt to break a human being, physically and mentally.
And this is where the timeline and the baseline matters so much. If Jacques Bordas Bley was still that fragile, obese, sickly 12-year-old on the inside, he would not have survived that basement.
No way. The trauma would have induced cardiac arrest or fatal shock. His heart wouldn't have taken the strain.
But he didn't break.
He endured it. And the argument here, and it's one Bordas himself alluded to, is that his survival was a direct result of that physiological and psychological upgrade. The entity's intervention didn't prevent the war. It didn't teleport him out of the room.
It just gave him the hardware to endure the worst violence humanity could throw at him.
Exactly. That is such a crucial distinction. We often want the aliens to be saviors who stop the bad things from happening. We want them to come down and stop the nukes or stop the war. But here, they were just optimizers. They built a tank, but they let the tank drive through the war.
They reinforced the chassis. They didn't change the road.
A perfect analogy. He survived the lethal terrestrial violence because his biology had been fortified. And perhaps, psychologically, knowing that he had been adopted by something greater gave him the mental fortitude to not give up in that basement.
So he survives the war. He rebuilds his life. And remember the promise from the terrorists back in 1923. In the future, we will come back to you.
And they did, but not immediately. There's a gap. He lives his life, he works, he climbs, and then we jump forward to 1951.
We're in the Pyrenees now, near Casteil. Jaime is fulfilling that role of the mountaineer. He's in his element, but the encounters change. They aren't ceremonial anymore. They get athletic.
The phenomenology shifts completely. He's hiking on expert-level paths, places where casual tourists do not go. These are goat tracks, and he realizes he's being followed.
Now remember, Jaime is an elite mountaineer at this point.
Oh yeah, he is the super soldier meteorologist. Nobody passes him. He prides himself on his pace.
Yeah.
And yet he's overtaken. He describes a tall, blonde individual, very Germanic in appearance, which is a common trope in European contact cases of the 50s. But the visual details are all wrong for a hiker.
How so?
The being is wearing shorts.
Shorts in the Pyrenees. At altitude.
Which is dangerous. The altitude, the wind chill, the rough terrain. You don't wear shorts unless you want hypothermia or serious lacerations. And in a detail I absolutely love, he notes the being is wearing unidentified species of boots.
Unidentified species, that's the scientist talking.
Totally. He's analyzing the gear. He's looking at the treads, the material. He's thinking, I know every boot manufacturer in Europe. I know Vibram. I know the local cobblers. What is that?
But it's the biomechanics that shock him more than the fashion choices.
Oh, much more. This being overtakes him at a blistering pace. No heavy breathing, no sweat, no cardiovascular distress, just pure, efficient motion.
Is the runner.
Yes. It defied the laws of human physiology as Bordas understood them. As a man who studied the limits of his own body in the mountains, seeing someone move like that was more shocking than seeing a spaceship. It was a biological impossibility.
And this wasn't a fleeting glimpse. There was interaction. Physical evidence, even.
Right. Bordas claims the entity gave him actual gold nuggets.
Real gold.
Yes, river gold, verified by jewelers. The gold is fascinating because it acts as a physical anchor. It's the gift again. But frankly, the gold is the least interesting part of this segment for me.
Oh, what's more interesting?
The most compelling evidence comes from the witnesses, specifically Odiel Bordas, his wife.
Tell us about Odiel. She wasn't a believer, was she? She wasn't leading a UFO cult with him?
Far from it. She was a grounded Parisian, a former seamstress for Dior. She was skeptical, pragmatic, and not prone to flights of fancy. She was the one balancing the books at the hotel.
Like a very down-to-earth person.
Very. Yet, decades later, she confirmed two things. First, that Jaime never wavered in his story. He never changed the details. But second, and more importantly, that the townspeople of Casteil also saw this being.
Wait, the whole town?
Well, multiple witnesses. They reported seeing a tall stranger descending from the mountain of Cango, walking directly into Jaime's hostel, bypassing the locals to speak directly with him.
Okay, that moves the event out of the realm of psychological projection and into public event.
It completely externalizes the phenomenon. That gives me chills. It's one thing to meet an alien in your mind. It's another thing when your neighbor says, hey, who was that tall guy with the weird boots who ignored us and went straight to your place?
It anchors the high strangeness in social reality. It means Jaime wasn't hallucinating. Or if he was, the hallucination was walking through the front door and ordering a room.
Black baths, pretty much.
As the years go on, though, the contact changes again. We move into the 1960s and 70s. Jaime is getting older. The runner doesn't show up anymore. The triangular ships don't land on the terrace.
The contact evolves. It goes from hardware to software. We see this in many longitudinal contact cases. What starts as nuts and bolts craft or physical beings eventually becomes psychic mediation. It moves from the outside to the inside.
And the location shifts to a cabin in Andorra.
Right. And the visuals get trippier, much more abstract.
Yeah.
He describes the room filling with flickering red tinsel.
Red tinsel, like a Christmas decoration.
But made of light, filling the air. It's a visual precursor to a trance state. It's almost psychedelic. And then comes the auditory command, a deep, disembodied voice saying, prepare yourself.
Prepare yourself. That's ominous. Or maybe instructional.
It's open to interpretation, but notice the pattern of his life. Childhood, a physical transformation via a substance, the tar, adulthood, physical interaction and testing with the runner, elder years, consciousness and instruction from the voice.
It's like a curriculum.
Exactly. The phenomenon grows with him. It matures as he matures. You don't teach calculus to a first grader. You start with the body, then the environment, then the mind.
So we have this incredible, verified life story. A meteorologist, a survivor, a contactee. But for the longest time, the world didn't know who Jacques Bordas Bley was. The literature called him Jacques Bordas, or Jacques Bley. Why the confusion? Why the fake name?
This is the literary detective story within the case. This is how truth gets corrupted, and it speaks to the messy history of ufology.
The Blasco Romero Enigma.
Correct. In 1968, a book was published called Jacques Bley. It was written by Ricardo Blasco Romero, and it was a strange artifact, half journalism, half novel. It just blurred the lines of reality. Now, Blasco Romero likely used the name Jacques and fictionalized parts of it to protect Bordas's privacy.
Okay, so a pseudonym makes sense for protection. This is Franco's Spain, after all. Standing out as a weirdo wasn't safe.
Not at all. But then comes the plagiarism, and this is where the ethics completely collapse. Antonio Ribera, who was a titan of Spanish ufology, I mean, this guy was the face of the field, he essentially took Blasco Romero's obscure book, lifted 2 entire chapters,
Just copy-pasted them.
Copy-pasted them, changed the name Jacques to Jaime, or kept it as Jacques in different editions, and then published it as his own original field research.
He stole the story. He just copy-pasted an alien encounter.
He stole it and he stripped it of its context. He presented it as if he had interviewed the man, as if he had verified the facts. And because Ribera was famous and published internationally, his version became the canon. This created that mythological accretion we talked about.
The real man, the guy who took the weather exam, the guy who ran the hotel, got buried under this stolen, semi-fictionalized persona.
For 50 years, researchers were looking for Jacques. They were looking for a ghost.
And that explains why it took until 2024 to get the real story.
Exactly. Jordi Ardanu's 2024 work, Jacques Bordas Bley, Contactee Guéridor, is a rescue mission. He dug through the archives to prove that the Jacques character was actually Jaime, a real citizen with a real tax ID and a real death certificate. He reconnected the myth to the man.
It's a reminder that even in fringe topics, we need good historians.
Oh, we need them more than anywhere else, because the fringe is where myths grow fastest.
And thanks to Ardanui, we know about the final chapter of his life, which is arguably the weirdest of all. Jaime moves to Palamos, a coastal town, and he changes careers again. He becomes a guaridor, a healer.
It's a logical progression if you accept the premise of the Trojan feast. If his bioenergetic field was permanently altered by that substance and the exposure to the entities, if he was, overcharged with life force, it stands to reason he might have had excess energy to transmit.
So he starts laying on hands.
Essentially, yeah, he starts treating the locals. But word spreads fast, and people believed it. We aren't just talking about curing a neighbor's backache or a psychosomatic rash.
No, we're talking about international desperation. Ardanui found letters in the archives that just blew my mind. There's one from 1977 from a sci-fi writer begging Bordas to intervene in the case of Prince Charles of Belgium.
The royal family of Belgium. Seriously, yes. The prince was suffering from an esophageal ulcer, and the letter treats Bordas as a resource of last resort. It's basically, the doctors have failed. Please, Starman, help us.
That is wild.
Yeah.
That implies his reputation had crossed borders and reached the aristocracy.
And there was another case with Italian children, too, paralyzed after a car accident. These letters prove that he wasn't just some local eccentric. He was a European phenomenon. He was viewed as a conduit for something non-human. People looked at him and saw a bridge to a power that medicine just didn't have.
But here's the thing that makes me trust him. Usually when people become gurus or healers, they start gathering followers. They start loving every other weirdo who comes along. They want to build a cult. They want to be the center of a movement.
Right, they validate everyone to grow their own brand.
But Jaime, he was a snog about his aliens.
He was an absolute gatekeeper. He was the most skeptical believer you could possibly meet.
Tell us about his beef with Julie Roca.
Okay, so Uli Roca Montagnola was another famous contactee of the era in Catalonia. He claimed to talk to an extraterrestrial named Antonio.
Antonio, just Antonio from Mars. Hey, it's me, Tony from space.
Laughs. Right. And Bordas hated it. He considered Roca fanciful. He just dismissed the Antonio story entirely.
Why? What was his criteria? Why is his space tar more valid than Roca's Antonio?
Because Bordas's lived experience was one of strangeness and difficulty. His logic was, real aliens don't chat. They don't have coffee with you. They don't have human names like Antonio. They don't engage in banal conversation.
They don't become your buddy.
No. His experience was that they are elusive, transformative, slightly terrifying, and deeply strange. They feed you tar and make you run up mountains. He refused to validate stories that didn't match the rigorous, high-strangeness standards of his own life.
He demanded quality control in ufology. I respect that. He's saying if it's too easy, it's fake.
It shows he wasn't just seeking attention. If he wanted attention, he would have teamed up with Roca and started a megacult. But he didn't. He isolated himself because he wanted to protect the integrity of his own experience. He preferred to be alone with the truth than popular with a lie.
So we come to the end, the final verdict. The entity made a promise on that terrace in 1923, we will never forsake you. And the implication throughout his life was agelessness.
You will not age. That was the phrase often cited. That was the carrot on the stick.
But spoiler alert, he died.
He did. He died in 2011.
So was it a lie? Was the whole thing a manipulation? Did the entities default on the contract?
This is where you have to look at the numbers. And for me, this is the aha moment of the entire deep dive. This is where the hair stands up on the back of my neck.
Lay it on me.
Jacques Bordas Bley was born on July 20th, 1911. He died in 2011.
He lived to be exactly 100 years old.
Exactly a century. To the year.
Yeah.
Now, consider the odds. Start with a sickly, obese child in 1911 who doctors said wouldn't thrive. Add the starvation and disease of pre-war Spain. Add the Spanish Civil War, the front lines, the bombing. Add the kidnapping and the torture at 3 a.m. Add decades of extreme high-altitude stress on the heart and lungs in the Pyrenees. Living at altitude wears you down. It doesn't preserve you.
It's a gauntlet designed to kill you by age 50, maybe 60 if you're lucky.
It is a biological obstacle course. Every single phase of his life had a high probability of death. And yet, he hit the century mark. He hit the triple digits.
So the interpretation isn't immortality. The entities weren't promising he would live forever.
No, the interpretation is maximal human longevity. The entity didn't make him a god. It optimized his biology to hit the absolute ceiling of the human lifespan for his generation. They squeezed every single drop of potential out of that hardware. They took a broken machine and tuned it to run for exactly 100 years.
You will not age meant you will not decay prematurely.
Exactly. He maintained that youthful vigor, that strength, right up until the clock ran out. He fulfilled the potential of the human form. He didn't wither away. He just finished.
That connects everything. The tar candy, the transformation, the survival in the basement. It was all about building a tank that could last 100 years.
A century of the contactee. A full epoch.
It brings up a provocative question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When we look at Jacques Bordas' Bley, we aren't just looking at a ghost story. We are looking at a man who merged the weather chart with the flying saucer.
He represents a grounding of the impossible. He reminds us that if these phenomena are real, they interact with our biology, our history, and our wars. They left tracks in the mud. They show up on the civil registry.
And here's the thought I want to leave you with today, and it's a bit of a disturbing one if you really think about it. If the entity's technology, that tar, could optimize a sickly, fragile human to last exactly to the year 1 century, was the mission simply a stress test?
That is the chilling part.
Was Jacques Bordas' Bley just a lab rat? Was the goal simply to see how far the human hardware could be pushed if you tweak the engine just right? A century-long experiment with a sample size of 1.
It redefines the adoption, doesn't it? I mean, we adopt pets, but we also adopt subjects for study. We adopt lab rats. Maybe the love and the protection were just the parameters of the experiment.
Keep the subject alive for 100 revolutions around the sun. Observe results.
Chilling.
We'll let you mull that over. If you want to dig deeper, look past the myths. Ignore Jacques. Find our Danouil's work. Find the real Jaime, because the truth, as always, is weirder than the fiction.
And often much more human.
Thanks for diving in with us. Stay curious.
And keep watching the skies and the weather charts.
See you next time.